Your friend will. Your friend will declares. Your friend will declares. Don't be a dick.
We start with Elder Scrolls Arena. Development of this game started in the early 90s and was initially to be released Christmas 1993. But Bethesda missed the window and released it in March 1994 on a 3.5-inch floppy and compact disc. For you children out there, that's the save file picture in Microsoft Word. The guys at Bethesda pitched the ideas of this game to Surtech, known for their wizardry games at the time, and they literally laughed at them for thinking they could do it. At the start of development, Arena was not an RPG at all. The player and team of fighters traveled the world fighting other teams in arenas, until the player became the champion of, well, the arena, in the Imperial City. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, or anyone that's been playing Oblivion just creamed themselves. The game had some minor side quests that really were not much importance. As the development of the game continued, the game's tournaments became less important and were dropped from the game altogether, and the side quests were bumped up as being, well, the most important. Cities were included outside of those once important arenas, and dungeons outside of those cities. RPG elements were then added alongside of this, and the arena combat actually never made it into the coding stage, and the few elements of that area of development remain, such as the title, the text file with the names of the fighting teams for every large city with a quick introduction. That's pretty much it. The idea of traveling with teams eventually scrapped as well, because the team wished to produce a first-person RPG, which would make the system somewhat less fun, I guess you could say. Because so much resources were used in creating the title, the game went into development as The Elder Scrolls Arena. So all the companies and everything had to market it as The Elder Scrolls Arena. The team covered up the original idea, stating that the Empire of Tamriel was so violent that it had been nicknamed the Arena, which sounds pretty badass if you ask me. The racy packaging concerned distributors, leading to initial distribution of just under 10,000 units. Nonetheless, month after month, games continued to sell, solely based off the word of mouth, and within no time, the game became a cult hit. And game historian Matt Barton concluded that the game set a new standard for this type of RPG, and demonstrated just how much room was left for innovation. Arena has definitely changed the genre as a whole, and continued on as a series that is used by developers around the world as a reference for this genre. To my knowledge, it contained no form of DLC or modding support, which is blasphemous in today's standards. It also didn't support multiplayer like most games of its time, but none of the Elder Scrolls do, and I'm not even going to say that again, just pointing that out. Well, there is mods, but I'm not. Anyways. The game is played with an FPS perspective, as all Elder Scrolls games are, and to melee attack, from my understanding, is to press in the right mouse button and hope for the best while flailing your arm and keeping a mouse on the desk. Pretty much just have a seizure, and it seems to work best. I wasn't even able to use my magic spells, as I wasn't able to get out of the starting dungeon, which I will get to later, about how fucking retarded it is. Anyways, as I was saying, I looked up how to use magic spells, and I quote, this is how to use it, I'm not shitting you, this is a quote, "Magic is used by cycling through a menu found by clicking the appropriate button on the main game screen, then clicking the spell to be used, and its target. The spell will then be cast, and to use it again, you have to go through the same painful process." After reading that, playing as a dark elf made me feel like a white paraplegic running the Olympics. If you are able to get out of the starting dungeon, as the game is unfucking forgiving, and the dungeon is no exception, but with the added effect that you have next to no weapons, armor, or fucking anything else. Oh, and if you stay in the dungeon too long, by the way, stronger enemies you can't kill will show up. It's bloody awful, but man is it fun. The lead designer of Morrowind stated that he started the game at least 20 times, and only got out of the beginning dungeon once. If you do end up making out of the dungeon, the game becomes slightly easier, as you're able to buy equipment and sleep at inns and etc. Like, there's a bunch of stuff to help keep you alive. But the world is so massive, it'll take you ages to go through it all, and you can even visit your favorite parts from the other Elder Scrolls games in glorious 240p. Yeah, that's right. Worse than Minecraft, bro. It is beyond highly recommended to use the fast travel feature in the game, as you'll usually end up getting ass fucked by a monster that you didn't see, or get lost before you make it to the town. A little heads up, by the way, watch out. In 2004, the floppy disk version was released as freeware, and in 2005, the CD-ROM version was released on a limited edition reissue for PC, with the same cover style as Morrowind, I might add, which is pretty cool. The compact disc version of the game is much more advanced than its floppy disk counterpart, featuring enhanced speech for some character and CGI video sequences, which means we're getting the shitty version for free. What the fuck? Daggerfall, the second game in the Elder Scrolls series. Development started directly after the release of the Arena in March 1994. The engine they initially used was a 2.5D raycast engine like Doom, but it was dropped for the X-Engine engine. And I'm not saying engine twice, it's literally X-Engine engine. Anyways, the game was originally titled Mournhold, and to be set in Morrowind, but was changed throughout development to take place in the provinces of High Rock and Hammerfell, which are in Tamriel's northwest. Daggerfall had little influence from other games that they were working on or had worked on before, other than Arena obviously. The only profound influence they had was from either literature or games they happened to be enjoying at the time, such as Vampire the Masquerade influenced the idea of vampire tribes throughout the region. Daggerfall was released on time on August 31st, 1996. Just like Arena, the initial release had a buggy code, but the coding for Daggerfall was far more patchable than Arena's. This led for a more cautious release schedule in the future. On July 9th, 2009, Daggerfall was released for free through Bethesda's website. In Daggerfall, the experience point system from Arena was replaced with a much better one that we see in the Elder Scrolls games now. One that rewarded a player for, well, role-playing as their character, and was skills-based. Daggerfall also came with an upgraded character creation engine. Not only did it have Arena's preset classes, but also give you the option to create your own, which at the time was goddamn groundbreaking. Nerds all around must have creamed in their pants from hearing this. Ted Peterson, the lead game director, had been quoted saying that he sometimes would roll the dice and see what kind of mutations my character would develop if I actually wanted to play the game. I know, I'm weird. Mod tools were not included with the game or created by Bethesda themselves, but some die-hard fans developed their own tools soon after release, and did some pretty amazing shit with it. Yeah. The third title in the series, entitled Morrowind, was first conceived during the development of Daggerfall, and was going to be set in Somerset Islands and called Tribunal, which for many of you fans out there would note to be one of the expansions of Morrowind. Development started right after the release of Daggerfall, and it was set up on a SVGA, or Super Video Graphics Array version of X-Engine. SVGA, which is usually referred to, is the resolution of 800 by 600, such as 1080p refers to the resolution of 1920 by 1080, which Bethesda used in later game called Battlespire, which is an Elder Scrolls spin-off. It's pretty shit. The amount of ideas that they had for this game was staggering, and it was finally decided that the idea with the original design was too big for the technology at the time, so it was placed on the back burner as Bethesda went to work on Redguard and Battlespire. After the completion of Redguard in 1998, they returned to the Morrowind project as Bethesda was noticing rival companies had grown as big or bigger than them. Bethesda sought to return to the king of the industry. X-Engine was shit, so they replaced it with the Direct 3D engine, which featured transform and lighting capacity, skeletal animations, and 32-bit textures. As stated before, the game was far too big, even for the technology a year later, so they decided to reduce the size of it, focusing solely on Daggerfall and the smaller area of land. You can correct me if I pronounce that name wrong. Whatever. They chose to populate the world as they did in Redguard, using their hands instead of using randomly generated algorithmic methods, as in Arena and Daggerfall. People were rumoring that Bethesda was going to release it with multiplayer, but Pete Hines shot down those rumors, saying, "No, not on release, not 3 months after, no. But the massive size of the game was far too large to tackle on their own. Bethesda tripled their staff and spent their first year of development on the Elder Scrolls construction kit, which would allow the staff to easily modify the game in small increments rather than large. According to the team, the entire game took close to 100 man-years to create. The Elder Scrolls construction set was created as a result of communal yearning to create a quote-unquote role-playing operating system capable of extension and modification. This game had the same release date issues as Arena, but on a larger scale. In May 2000, Bethesda announced that the game would be released in later 2001. Exactly 1 year later, on May 5th, 2001, Bethesda announced that they have been developing Morrowind for release on Xbox. At E3 2001, Bethesda had an outstanding showing of the game in beta build. People that pre-ordered the game after this would get a release date of November. On October 10th, 2001, GameSpot announced that Morrowind's release date had been pushed back yet again to March 2002. On October 12th, Bethesda stated that it will be released in spring 2002, confirming GameSpot's delay without agreeing to the more specific date of March. By March 2002, nothing got announced. Everyone was waiting on an announcement, but nothing came. On April 23rd, 2002, Bethesda announced that the PC version had gone gold and was to be released on May 1st, 2002. The Xbox release date was delayed again. On June 4th, Bethesda let out a press release with a set date for the Xbox release date. June 7th, a mere 3 days away. There were a total of 2 large expansion packs released from Morrowind, entitled Tribunal, which was released on November 6, 2002, solely on the PC, and Blood Moon, which was released on June 3, 2003, once again solely on the PC. They were bundled together with the patched version of Morrowind, and were released on October 31st on both consoles as the Game of the Year edition. Oblivion, the 4th title in the series, had its development started shortly after the release of Morrowind, and in mid-September 2004, Oblivion was announced and its title released. Bethesda wanted to aim for a late 2005 publication of the game, so it could be released as an Xbox 360 launch title, but failed to do so, as they usually do, and was pushed back to March 20th, 2006. Both the Xbox and 360 and the PC versions were released on the same day. The PS3 version of the game was announced shortly after and was to be ported by 2K Studios. It was released exactly 1 year after the other consoles and was praised for its graphical improvements made on it since then, compared to the Xbox 360 version. Just so you guys know, I actually hate all consoles. I think that they bring hate among the gamers who should be standing hand in hand playing on the same server, shit like that. So I'll literally be telling you the guys' sheer and gritty truth, no matter how much you hate to hear it, shit like that. Just saying. Anyways, Bethesda used 3 separate game engines this time. They used Gamebryo for the graphics, Havoc for the physics, and Speedtree for the foliage. Oblivion was the first game in the series to have DLC, and let's be honest, it was for the most part simply retarded and started the microtransactions with real money for literally nothing in the industry shit. The first form of DLC that was released for Oblivion was armor for the horses in the game, which cost just under $3 on the Xbox and $2 on the PC. Many gamers thought the idea of micropayments for downloadable content was a good idea, but most expressed dissatisfaction at the prices. Other minor DLCs have been released, but they're literally nothing. They're not even worth mentioning, okay? Fuck that shit. Microtransaction, motherfucker. God damn. Knights of the Nine was released on November 21st, 2006 on the marketplace, and available through retail for the PC. The expansion was included in the PS3 version of the game, as it really was just a polished edition of the game's main plot. It was good. Shivering Isles was released on the 27th of March 2007, once again for both consoles, but this expansion was $20, and it well deserved that price. It features more than 30 hours of gameplay, excellent voice acting, new content galore, and not to mention a new island to play on, which was ruled by a Daedric prince named Sherogorath, who, trivia time kids, is in Skyrim for a brief moment. I thought it was pretty cool. No spoilers though, I'm not gonna say what happens. I'm sorry. Finally, on September 10th, 2007, the Game of the Year edition of Oblivion was released on the Xbox 360, PC, and PS3. But PS3 got it on October 16th, a couple months later. And it contained all the DLC. All the DLC. Finally, last but not least, Skyrim. Unlike the two games before this, Skyrim was released on time with many bugs. Here's looking at you, PS3 version. Many of which were fixed by now. Shortly after release of Oblivion, Skyrim was conceptualized, but work on it did not start until after Fallout 3's release in 2008. Skyrim was announced on December 11th, 2010 at the Spike VGAs, and was released on November 11th, 2011. The game was developed by a team of roughly 100 people, and the production was supervised by Todd Howard, who directed many titles released in the past by Bethesda Softworks. Bethesda also created a new engine for the future games, and it is just what Skyrim runs on. Its name is simply Creation Engine. It has everything that the old engines that they used to work with had, plus many improvements. They no longer needed Speed Tree to produce flora. They could simply create it within the engine itself. The engine is so advanced, Bethesda was able to give weight to the branches on the trees, which affected how a tree would blow in the wind. Not to mention the weather effects they created. Many people don't know this. The wind affects the flow of water in the rivers and streams, and even affects the way the snow blows. Snow is no longer a simple textural effect. It's an actual object flying down and can fall upon the terrain. Although Bethesda did use Havoc engine for the character animation, which is a good thing as the animation of the character looks bullshit compared to sheet animation in Oblivion. God, the third-person camera, why? Anyways, the engine made it possible to talk to people within real time. If you remember back in Oblivion, when you talked to a person, the game would freeze and zoom into their face. In Skyrim, the engine continues and is real time. The design team created the province by hand. It's fairly similar to the size of Cyrodiil, which is the place you play in Oblivion. The mountainous topography of Skyrim makes it much more difficult to get around than the flat Cyrodiil, making it far longer to traverse. The team put a lot of focus into making the game's 10 races feel unique from each other. Todd Howard, the director of Skyrim, said that the player choosing a race and gender at the beginning of a game was more important of a decision than in previous Elder Scrolls because of the culture in Skyrim's world is rooted by racism and sexism. In Oblivion, only one team member designed the dungeons in Oblivion, which is why many of you remember the same old rock texture over and over again. But in Skyrim, they had a team of 8 people, which is still a small team considering they had to create 150 dungeons, but they did an excellent job at making nothing ever look similar. Yeah.